Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're back in War Thunder, and I'm going to be talking about something that's brought up quite a lot in the community. This idea that a lot of the maps become quite stale, especially around the objectives and stuff like that. So generally, how to win, we're talking mainly about realistic battles here. How to generally win a match is either bomb out the bases and then hit the airfield, or try and destroy a bunch of ground targets, generally medium tanks or pillboxes, depending on what side you're on. And over the years, there's been some interesting ideas thrown about on the forums and on the War Thunder Reddit, and generally it's a good idea to explore them and have a think about how they could be implemented into the game. So, today, in two parts, we're going to have a look at one of those ideas. Now, it's an idea I've thought about for a very long time, the idea of adding in Paratrooper troops. We know that in War Thunder already, if you go to some of the single missions, there are transport aircraft available in them. We're talking about C-47s. When we look at the single mission where you have to fly the Me-262 over Bastogne, they're actually trying to get supplies to Bastogne, and you have to destroy them all. There's also a Russian aircraft, which is much more of an observation aircraft, but it's still in there, and it's one of the Tier 1 missions, I believe, when it comes to Russia, like the Spanish Civil War ones, where you basically have to take off, land at an airfield, and then go back. Very much a training mission. But some of these models have been in-game for at least, a year or two, so they are there. So in these two parts, the first part, which you're listening to right now, we will focus on aircraft that can be implemented into the game when it comes to adding in more objectives. So we're talking about AI paratrooper aircraft and which aircraft each nation would use, or at least some examples of aircraft that can be used for each nation, depending on the map and depending who you are playing. We're also going to talk about how it could work when it comes to maybe how many points they're worth. Maybe you get a bonus if you destroy it before the soldiers come out. What would make it more realistic to add them in, focusing around combat areas, stuff like that, and we'll move on from there. The second part, we'll be looking at a much more practical approach on how to do it. So what I will actually do is I'll bring up a bunch of maps, images of maps, and we'll use some tools to start drawing on them and see what lines I would take and for these paratrooper aircraft and everything like that. So, in this first part, let's start off and let's talk about the aircraft that could be used. We'll first look at the British aircraft. Now, you're going to see a bit of similarities between some of these nations, because generally, when it came to the Allies and the Axis, when we look at Russian transport aircrafts, they generally didn't use them that much. They seemed to use them as a desperation attempt at the start of Operation Barbarossa to try and stem some of the German advance, but it didn't work very well. And that was basically it. There was also some examples where they used interesting ideas that we'll get into. Also, a lot of aircraft which were used when it came to paratroopers were basically the same one, and so we'll go through that. But first of all, let's start off with the British. The British, I have singled out two aircraft which I think could work very well. The first one is the Avro York. Now, the Avro York is basically based on the Lancaster. It is a 4-engine transport plane, which could also be used as a bomber. But the great thing about the British, one of the great things that the British did in World War II, they made a really good set of heavy bombers. When you look at the Halifax, the Wellington, the Lancaster, the Stirling, maybe not the Whitley, but the Whitley is there too. And then you've got the York, then you've got the Manchester, then you've got the Lincoln. Like, there's tons of different heavy bomber aircrafts. So a lot of them were basically surplus to requirement. So they picked the best ones, made a ton of them, looking at the Halifax Lancaster to actually do the proper bombing run missions, the carpet bomb missions, which started early war and didn't finish until after the war. The night bombing, if you've never heard of them. Whereas in early war they used Wellingtons and Whitleys, and then they moved on to Lancasters and Halifaxes. That's basically how it went when it came to heavy bombers. I'll probably do some kind of historical video on it, because it's the part I'm really interested in. But anyway, getting back to it, the Avro York is very similar to the Lancaster, but it was used in the transport role, because you already had the Lancaster for the heavy bomber part. So it used to transport troops a lot. It was given the designation the Type 685, and I'll just read an excerpt from www.militaryfactory.com. It's a wonderful website which looks into basically everything military when it comes to vehicles and weapons and everything like that. So Avro proceeded with the design of a new 4-engine transport based on its Lancaster under the Type 685 designation. To expedite its development, the new aircraft retained the wing sections, tail unit and undercarriage of the original, and had an all-new slab-sided fuselage added for improved internal volume. A double-finned rudder arrangement was seated at the extreme aft end of the aircraft, just as in the Lancaster, and the cockpit flight deck was fitted at the extreme front end of the aircraft with good views over the nose. It also used the Rolls-Royce Merlin 24 series liquid-cooled inline piston engines, which gave 1280 horsepower. A lot of power. But anyway, generally this plane was used for transporting. Something that I'm looking at when I'm looking at these transport planes or paratroop planes is I don't want them to have a lot of armament, if any at all, because I want them to be a very good target to attack, but I don't want it to have too many defenses. The reason for this is I want there to be a big payoff if the transport aircraft actually get to their destination and drop off either the paratroopers or the supplies or whatever. The other team would lose a lot of spawn points if they actually get to their positions. The idea would be to try and make them a good target to go after, instead of something that's only going to knock off just a few of the spawn points. Kind of like when you kill a medium tank, generally just one tank isn't going to do a lot. But if you have a formation of, let's say, 10 paratrooper planes or 10 transport planes carrying a lot of supplies, if you knock them all out and they don't get to their destination, or maybe they don't get to their destination in a time limit, maybe you get a lot of points for that, meaning that people will fight around them, there'll be useful objectives, everything like that. So, that's something to consider. Moving on from the Avro York, we have the Vickers Warwick multi-role heavy bomber aircraft. This is another aircraft which was used for transporting and also heavy bomber. It's very similar to the Manchester, if you know what that is. It is made by Vickers, though, and even though it was used as a heavy bomber, this is an aircraft I would try and shy away from, but it is definitely something that can be used. I would rather use the Avro York instead of the Vickers Warwick. The reason the Warwick is a worse choice is because it's quicker, and it's also armed to the teeth. It has a very similar configuration of guns compared to the Halifax that we have in game right now. So yeah, maybe you could add it in as kind of maybe a slightly different version of the York, but you'd have to strip its guns out, because we want these aircraft to be very lightly armed or not armed at all, high priority targets, and to affect the map, and medium speed as well. You don't want them to be too fast. You could even add them in. You know how after like 20 minutes or so, new targets spawn in, which are armoured vehicles. What you could do on some maps instead of having the armoured vehicles on the ground, maybe you can have paratrooper planes. Maybe they have to go in and capture zones or anything like that. That could easily be possible in this new system. I think it could work pretty well. That is something that could work really well. So try and give a bit of variety instead of just having the armoured vehicles. Yeah, and also it would be much more useful for certain planes. Obviously, not as useful for bombers, but then again, you know, bombers already have targets to go after. They already have the ground targets that they're supposed to be going after anyway. So yeah, that is a thing that I didn't think about. That could be something that is added in. Now, we move on to America. Now, America is very hard to talk about without mentioning the C-47, because it's probably the most famous of the many transport aircraft employed during World War II. It was also used in Vietnam, which I didn't actually know. But when we look at the C-47, basically every other nation in the war, apart from Germany, or maybe even Germany, but I can't find the one in German, every other nation used a licensed version of the C-47, or just used the C-47. The British used it, the Russians used it, the Japanese used it, and of course the Americans used it. So it is definitely one of the iconic aircraft of the war. Probably the most iconic aircraft of the war which wasn't like military use, which wasn't, you know, gun to the teeth and designed to blow up stuff. I can't really think of another one which, like a transport plane, maybe the Ju-52 for the Germans, but that would be it. So anyway, if we're going to talk about adding in transport or paratrooper aircraft, the C-47 always has to be considered on the American side, and we already have the model of a C-47 in-game, and all it has to be is AI. I'm definitely not saying that we should have player-manned paratrooper aircraft. I definitely think they could be an objective that's added, which is AI. So, it was also called the Dakota. I didn't know that. I always knew it as the Skytrain. It's obviously got both names. But anyway, yeah, there's not a lot to say about the Douglas C-47. Everybody knows it, and if you don't know it, well, there's a picture right in front of you. Moving on, we have another version for the Americans, which is the DC-2. Now, this was a commercial airliner in the 1930s, changed to a military transport aircraft. So this could be, maybe you use the C-47 for paratroopers, depending on the map, and then on another map you use the DC-2, which would be used to move supplies instead of paratroopers. So instead of having paratroopers with their parachutes, because also we have models of pilots with parachutes, so it can't be much harder to do actual paratroopers coming out of a plane, because we already have it for every plane in the game. So, you know, there's another thing to throw in, another spanner in the works, which definitely helps out our case. And it can't be very hard to model in having, you know, medical supplies or ammunition supplies dropped using parachutes as well from something like a DC-2. So the DC-2 is something that we could definitely add into the game, something that is an interesting aircraft. Once again, it's very much unarmed, so perfect for what we're looking for. A little bit slower than some of its counterparts, such as the Avro York, which could go at 300 miles per hour, I believe, which is pretty nippy. Let's see, maximum speed of 300 miles per hour, range of 3,000 miles. Service ceiling of 23,000 feet. That is for the York. And for the DC-2, I believe it was a hell of a lot slower than that. Top speed of 210 miles an hour. So yeah, one of its issues is that it had engines which only had 700 horsepower, which, you know, it's a 1930s aircraft, so that makes sense. Let's move on to Russia. Russia's a bit more limited when it comes to this. I talked about it before when talking about how they didn't really use paratroopers that much when it came to World War II. They had divisions which were designed for, you know, being paratroopers. I can't exactly remember what they were called, but you know how it is. And so we're going to go with two interesting options. First of all, we'll stick in the TB3. Everybody loves the TB3, massive target. Issue is it's gun to the teeth. Even if you are, let's say, a tier 3-4 aircraft, you're gonna take damage going past a TB3, especially if you have to go past a flight of 5 of them. They are huge targets though, so it's quite easy to take them out. But also, something to be considered is, because they're very slow, they should be easy targets to hit, but you're gonna get hit. It's one of those things, it's like when you try and hit a B-17. You're gonna get shot no matter what. Even if you take down the guy, you're gonna sustain damage. And you don't really want that from something which is an AI thing, so maybe you take out some of the guns. Maybe you leave it with that center gunner with the two 7.7s or 7.93s, whatever they are. Maybe you take out the front gunner and maybe the ones on the sides hanging off the wings. But here's a bit of footage which is really interesting. It's from 1938. It's Russian paratroopers jumping from the wings of the archival and some newsreel archival footage, and hopefully this doesn't get me a copyright strike because it's public domain footage. But I feel like if you could implement something like this in the game, I mean, it would be completely useless. Like it would be one of those interesting quality of life things, but it still could be added, and it would be nice to see. Moving on to the next aircraft, so we already have a TB3 in game, so you know, adding it in as an AI would be quite easy to do. It is incredibly slow though, which is definitely an issue. Moving on, we have the Li-2, the Lisunov or Lisunov Li-2, which is a straight copy of a C-47. It's, sorry, no it isn't. It was a license-built version of the Douglas DC-3, which was produced in the 1930s by the Americans, very similar to the C-47. So you could definitely, you know, use that for the Russians. I think that is the reason why I picked this one is I think this is the one which is in that single mission with the turret on top of it, or with whatever it has poking out of the top. Some kind of either radar or radio or observation post. I'm not exactly sure, but this is definitely a plane which could be used when we're looking at using Russian transport aircraft. Moving on to the Japanese, the last nation, which isn't the last nation because I've missed one, which is the Germans. Now the Germans, the only real example, I mean there are many examples, but the easiest one and the one that everybody knows is the Ju-52. The Ju-52 is something that I'm surprised isn't in game already. I thought it would be. Maybe when we add in a few more German bombers. I suppose they've focused more on the Ju-88s and the He-111s, but the Ju-52 was a transport aircraft which was also used as a medium bomber. It's a tri-motor, so very similar to the Sparviero, if you've ever flown that, the Italian Stallion. And it was used as a paratrooper aircraft, it was used as a transport aircraft, as a bomber aircraft. It was basically very much a jack of all trades, master of none. But still, it could be used. It was also used by the Spanish, showing its age. Its first flight was 1930. So, you know, it's quite an old aircraft, with a max speed of 168 miles an hour. So yeah, this thing is pretty slow, so it would be perfect for what I'm talking about. Also, in its transport form, it shouldn't have any guns on it, so you could definitely add it in being unarmed, which is, you know, what we're looking for. So that's the only one I would think of when talking about Germany. I think it's the only one you really need when we're looking at Germany. The last one is Japan. Now, Japan has some interesting ones, which some are already in game, some should be in game. The first one is the Showa, or Nakajima LD-2. This is a straight copy of the Douglas DC-3, which is exactly the same as the Li-2, just a slightly different paint job. So yeah, this is what I was talking about before, where it seems like everybody, every nation copied the Americans when it came to the transport genre. So even if you're on you know, a different map, maybe you're fighting a different enemy, all you need to do is change the paint on a Douglas DC-3 and it becomes an LD-2 or it becomes an LI-2, or you could just put the British roundel on it and Bob's your uncle. So if you want to be as minimal as possible when it comes to looking with Gaijin, you could definitely do it with the DC-3. So just looking at the top speed of the DC-3, we're looking at 220 miles per hour, so that's actually decent when it comes to it, but I've already talked about this when looking at the Russians. The other one is the G4M. The G4M was a medium bomber, but it was also used as a transport plane. So I definitely think it could be used as a transport plane. It's already in the game, so that helps it out a hell of a lot, but it is quite nippy, which is kind of the issue with it. 265 miles an hour, not as quick as the Orc again, but very nippy, and could definitely work pretty well. The only issue is you'd have to strip some of the guns from it, so you'd have to take off that 20mm at the back. Once again, talking minimally, if Gaijin wanted to do this as minimally as possible, or just add it into the game without completely refining it, you could just turn off the gunners. You don't even have to change the model if you don't want. So yeah, you could add this in. There was also the G4M2E Model 24 TIE, which was the Mitsubishi Navy Type 1 Attack Bomber Model 24 TIE. The special version for the transport of the ramming attack bomb plane MXY7 Oka or Baka Model 11. Conversions of G4M2A Model 24 Otsu and 24 High had armor protection for pilots and fuselage fuel tanks. I think that would be kind of cool to add in. Something else to talk about would be AI suicide planes when we look at the Japanese. But you know, that's for another day. Right now we're focusing on transport aircraft and paratroopers. Another plane which we could add in would be the Mitsubishi, always struggled with that word, G3M, which I'm surprised is not in game. There was 1,000 of them made. It was a medium bomber. It was also used for transport though, and at 233 miles an hour could be perfect for the transport role that we are talking about. It also doesn't have a ton of guns on it. It really struggles when we look at the guns on the tail. And the armaments was once again 120 in a rear dorsal turret, and then 477s in the cockpit, left, right, and side positions, and in retractable forward dorsal turrets. So you could just get rid of that 20mm, and you know, Bob's your uncle. You could have a transport plane. So, you know, it could definitely work. Something that is kind of interesting when thinking about how to implement the Paratrooper or transport aircraft is, instead of having to bomb out bases, maybe you could capture them. So the idea would be, maybe you put in a bunch of transport aircraft or paratrooper aircraft, or, you know, I'm just going to say transport aircraft from now on. Maybe you put a bunch of them in the game and they have to drop people or supplies on zones, and if they drop them, then you capture them instead of the tanks having to get there. Maybe that's a different way that you could capture zones. Another thing that I think should be thought about is, on every map that's large enough, and most of them are now, when we look at them, there should be some kind of forward base for each side, forward airfield. And if you lose your bases, the 3 bases around the map, then maybe you lose that forward airfield and you have to move back to your main airfield. Now, there are certain maps which this could happen straight away on. We look at Berlin, we look at Hokkaido with the airfield for the British on the side. We also look at some of the Japanese maps, which I can never remember the name of, but that will be looked at in the next part. So we'll talk about tactics, we'll talk about what these planes could be used for in the next part. So I'll see you tomorrow, and I'll see you then.